Welcome back to the channel. Today we are diagnosing this Exmark zero-turn EFI Kohler that won't start. And so kind of running through the steps, and what I've done is confirm that it has spark. It does crank and everything, but it's not getting any fuel. It has no fuel pressure at the fuel rail. And so I want to kind of show you the steps to narrow that down and diagnose exactly what the issue might be. So first thing I did is just removed this cover. Actually, I lifted up the seat and removed this cover. In my case, it was 2 Phillips screws. And what that does is gives you access to the fuel rail and the pressure test port. So what I did then is screwed on my fuel pressure test gauge, and this is just the standard GM size. You can rent a gauge like this from your local auto parts store if you don't already have one. And I screwed that on, and what you should see is when you turn the key to on and your fuel pump kicks in, you should see your fuel pressure jump up. And that's not happening for me. So another thing that I did just to make sure is made sure that my injectors are actually firing. So what you'll do there is I rented a Noid light set, and this is for fuel injector diagnosis. You just need to find out of these 6 lights, I guess here, 6 or 8 lights or whatever you get, find the one that fits. In this case, it's the GM PFI light, and you just slide that right down into the contacts, and then while cranking, you should see that light flash. And what that's telling you is that your injector is getting the voltage signal and is pulsing and injecting fuel. The problem is we don't have any fuel to inject. So what we need to do is trace this fuel back to our fuel pump, make sure we're getting power to the fuel pump, and I'll meet you there in just a second. Alright, so the fuel pump on this particular model is down under the right rear of the engine. You can see it sitting right there. And basically this has your left and right fuel tanks running through your mixing valve. I shouldn't say mixing valve, your selector valve right here under the seat. And then if you trace that line back and down, it ends up at the pump right down here. And as you can see, here's our issue right there. The electrical connections to this thing are so bad that our negative has come completely unattached and our positive is not looking much better. So what I'm going to do is get my voltmeter just to confirm that this is our negative, this is our 12 volt feed, and if so, they're actually already stripped for us. We're just going to grab a couple eyelets and attach those to each side and give it another test and see how our fuel pressure looks. We got our wiring cleaned up. You can see here we got 2 new connectors on there and confirmed the positive and negative. It's actually labeled on the back of the fuel pump there. There's a little plus and minus. In my case, the positive is on the bottom, the negative is on the top. There is a little spot that this wire's pinched, I'm just noticing. Right in there. I should have caught that. I'll probably cut that shorter and fix that. But anyway, what you want to do now is with your voltmeter again on DC volts, we're going to put the positive on the positive and then the negative up there. I'm going to need more than one hand to do this. I'll try and set you guys up roughly in the vicinity. I'm going to turn the key to the run position, and then we should see our voltage come off and on as the pump is engaged and disengaged. There it goes. And you can hear it. We're getting our 12 volts to the pump. You can hear it pressurizing the rail. And now if we run back up and check our pressure gauge, you can see there we have fuel pressure. So at this point, this thing should start. I'm going to get all the loose screws off of it and see if I can give it a start for you guys. I wanted to mention, if you did not have a pump that ran, if you had voltage at the pump but no fuel pressure still, you have a bad pump, and that could still be a possibility for us. It's not running yet, but we'll just see what happens here. So it'll run for a little while and then die. And I don't know enough about these EFI to know if there should be constant fuel pressure or not. My assumption is yes. That'd be a typical setup, is to have a constantly running fuel pump pressurizing the rail. And as you can see, our fuel pressure has dropped. So I'm going to go back down and see if we still have our 12 volts or not. Set you guys up again. At the moment, we have no power. So I think what I'm going to end up doing is tracing this fuel pump wiring back to see what's controlling that 12 volt feed, and maybe even find a broken wire or a bad fuse. And if not, I might just run a new 12 volt feed to solve this problem. But I'll keep you guys updated as we go. Alright, it's been a couple hours. I took lunch break and had to work on another project real quick. But anyway, what I'm doing now is trying to isolate whether the issue lies in my power or my ground at the pump. And so the way I've done that very simply is go direct from the battery, and we'll start with power. So if we put our black probe on the negative of the battery, will be on the DC volt scale, and then our red probe on the power lead down at the pump. That gives us a confirmed good ground directly to our battery, and if we turn the key on and have 12 volts, we know that the power side is good. And so I did that, and I had 12 volts. So now, what I've got is the opposite. I'm going to put my probe down here at the pump on the negative side, try and get that to stay on its own. And then we'll head up to the battery and go to the positive side with our key turned to the run position. Oh, there goes my meter. And we've got nothing. So in that case, we know that our problem lies in the ground side. There's a ground problem. We have just a brief flicker. I'll show you the meter here. There's a brief flicker of voltage when that relay engages, but it's only about 7.5 volts, and then the rest of the time it sits at 0. So that's a problem. So what I'm going to do, instead of chasing all these wires around and trying to figure out where my ground problem lies, I'm going to try a little trick. I'm just going to run a jumper. Since this is the ground side, I'm going to run a small jumper from the ground terminal here right up to the mounting bolt, right up above that, right up there on the frame, and clean that up real good. And I'll also confirm that that's a good ground up there on the frame. And so I'm just going to be providing a secondary ground to the pump. And I'm just going to wrap that up real quick and show you what that looks like, and then we'll test it to see if our results change. So we've got our auxiliary ground running from the pump negative. You can just see that wire running up and around, and it's just screwed right in there to the mounting screw. And all I did is just took a small piece of sandpaper and cleaned that up a little bit there on the back side, and then used my voltmeter from the 12 volt positive lead on the fuel pump, and then used that as my ground just to confirm that I had my 12 volts. So I'm just going to tighten this up a little bit better, and we will take a look and see if it worked. We've got that tightened up. Our pressure is pretty low, just kind of some residual, about 15 psi. I'm just going to turn the key to the run position. And it looks like it worked. The pump kicked on, and it's just going to kind of pulse. It pulses between 12 and 5 volts, it seems like, about every 3 or 4 seconds. So I would say that is a confirmed repair. Let's just finalize and make sure it runs here. Looks good. I'm going to just do one final test, kick on the blades and drive it around under load and just make sure that everything's working.